So for the RGW agenda, go ahead,
Just one note. Yeah, the Swift API does allow you to update metadata on bucket, but we don't support the specific API on S3. Like, we only support it on Swift.
Seems like that'd be something to look at.
Should be trivial to extend it to S3, an S3 extension, but yeah, I'm not sure that it's really needed in the specific case.
I like stuff that adds richness. I want to give people more tools to explore.
Yep.
All right. So the first thing on the agenda is dashboard and RGW. Alfonso, Ernesto, do you guys want to take it away?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess.
So we'll share my screen in order to have a quick walkthrough what are the current features in dashboard and what are the roadmap that we want in order to integrate more features and enhance the user experience. So I will share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So here we have configured correctly the object gateway management frontend. So if we go to daemons, one of the latest features that we added is the ability to select the object gateway provided you have more than one daemon, and assuming that each daemon is running in a zone in a different realm. So here you can see the daemon ID in that case is equal to the port, but the daemon name could be anything. These are the relevant, everything is relevant info from the daemons. We have added the column zone group and so on in order to, when you have multi-site configuration, to see more clearly in which zone is running. Okay. Apart from this, when there is multi-site configuration, it appears apart from the overall performance for the daemon, it has some counters that you can see here. When there is a multi-site, then we have added some Grafana panels for tracking the multi-site sync performance of the replication objects for the source zone. Here I ran a quick benchmark in order to have some workload here, and we have the replication, the throughput, the objects, all in rigorous or unsuccessful replications. When we go to users, for example, we added the ability to see the capacity limit like a progress bar. So you can see, for example, for the capacity limit, you see the used space and the free space in this tooltip. For the object limits the same, one used, 9 free, the maximum is 10. And apart from this, you can see that if we select, for example, this is the username dev1 from the realm 1. If we select the object daemon 8002, then you see the users belonging to the other realm. And you can see the details here. Okay. Apart from this, regarding quotas, it's not only for users, also for buckets. Here we don't have buckets in the realm 2, but in realm 1 we have a couple of buckets, and you can see that for the test bucket we have set up some also in the tooltip some bucket quota, so it is reflected in this progress bar. Same for the object limit. If you edit a bucket, you can enable versioning or set up the multi-factor authentication delete, which is an extra protection. Here is a tooltip with a brief description of it. For the locking is only is disabled because you can only enable locking when create a bucket. Then it is enabled. You can set up for days or years. This is to be enhanced quickly. Have this tooltip also to explain briefly what it's about. So apart from this, and users and daemons, regarding buckets and edit, you can see here also the relevant bucket quota info, the versioning status right now, and the multi-factor delete is current status. So this is more or less what we have. And following the agenda, and remembering that we have a conversation with Matt, the last feedback that we got was about enhancing the bucket policy and the bucket management in general terms, like adding the quota management, because right now we are only displaying the bucket quota or the user quota, but not able to manage yet. So the last feedback that we got was that about adding this, the quota management, notifications, encryption. So I wanted to ask Matt or Casey or the RGW team, is this still valid? This enriching all the bucket features?
Very much so. I think those would be high priorities for enhancement. There's a nexus of different documents and policies that go on buckets. We would want, I think, to explore those in a separate console. At least that's my feedback on other folks.
So is there a put bucket encryption app that takes an XML document?
There is indeed, sir. And
Do we support it?
We support it. We don't. Well,
Okay.
Marcus is working on it, so the answer is yes. Yes. No, from the revolution, no, but it would. No, but yeah, it's coming. But there's other. But that's yeah. But that's one of the ones we want. We'd like to rendezvous with for sure.
So in terms of dashboard interface, it feels like we just need a place to copy paste an XML document to upload it for bucket policy, encryption, notifications, etc. They could probably look pretty similar for each of those, I assume.
Okay. Then I left a tracker issue with all the well, it's like an epic tracker for all the work that we have to do. So we will take this all this stuff to be reflected in tracker issues in order to implement that features. And from on the other side, one of the topics that we had regarding this management between orchestrator, dashboard, and Rados Gateway admin executable. Last time we talked about with the orchestrator team, it was put on the table the possibility of the dashboard being able to talk directly to Rados Gateway admin, or at least to be able to execute Rados Gateway admin commands. So what should be the approach here, to create a manager module as a wrapper for the Rados Gateway admin? Is there any other possibility, or?
Well, absolutely, there is another possibility that we should be talking, I think, to the admin ops API or the S3 APIs directly, which do most of the work that we've been talking about a minute ago.
Okay, you're talking about the admin ops API, right?
I may have missed something. I mean, if we're talking about all the policy things, those are all in the S3 API. But apologies if I missed it or skipping to quota or something.
Currently,
wherever possible, we'd like to avoid using the RGW admin, and we'd like to be trying to use if necessary, widen admin ops, I think.
Right. We might be missing a bunch of APIs, though. Like stuff like configure MFA, like the actual token thing.
But for any one of
Software
those,
Sorry,
we could consider those a defect, would they be, or a feature that we want to try to.
Yeah.
configuring the MFA for?
the key. What's the name of the multi-factor authentication device?
But like this, you mean? But for?
Well, here you enable it on the bucket, but you need to have a user-defined authentication device.
Yeah.
So you need to synchronize it, like configure it and synchronize it.
Yeah, if you create this, then you have to put the
Oh,
topics
so you have
element.
it. How is that working?
How is this working? You mean?
Yeah, how is
Well,
is it executing Redis admin commands?
yeah, assuming that you have set up the MFA, you have run the MFA. The current status is assuming you have run the Rados Gateway MFA setup. Then you have your application with the TOTP generator ready. So when you enable the multi-factor authentication, you have to put the number of the setup that you made and the pin that is providing you the TOTP. And then if it's successful, then it is enabled.
Right, but at the background, how is that doing?
Yeah. Okay. What you mean is doing the equivalent to the Rados Gateway Admin MFA's command, right?
So it executes the Redis Gateway Admin command in the background, at the back, in order to set it.
Yeah, I think it early consumes, right? The Rados admin CLI, right? Alfonso?
Yeah, you have to run the command in the background right now. I'm assuming that a way to manage it graphically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was. You mean the Rados Gateway Admin MFA create?
Yeah. So we're missing
Go.
My point was that we're missing some admin ops. We cannot do it through the RESTful API.
So yeah, I guess it would be good to do like an audit of all of the things that we think we need Rados GW admin for from the dashboard. Initially, I thought it was just to create keys, a user and keys for the dashboard to talk to RGW's admin API.
Well, there's a broader application too of things that, for example, Rook wants to do, manage external mode clusters. So which is the same thing. We'd like to get an audit of all the things people aspire to do with it. But the amount of change that I could see us doing in admin ops means maybe we should also version the API. I don't think it currently is versioned.
It is not.
Can I ask a question about the way that the daemons panel works? I guess this is kind of a high-level question here. It's actually all three of these have this thing at the top that says Select Object Gateway. It doesn't, as far as I can tell, what that actually is selecting is what realm you're looking at. Is that right? That seems to be how it behaves for users and buckets. Like it's which independent namespace of users and buckets you're looking at.
You mean the selector?
This, yeah.
Yeah, exception is the name, but you see the name, and then within parentheses is the realm, so it is clear for you where is the realm running.
Yeah, I guess what it seems to me like what that actually should be is instead of saying selected object gateway, it should be realm : and then it should be a drop down that just shows realm 1 and realm 2. And then the page should show like all of the all the daemons for that realm, all the zones actually. It should probably be like a multi-level thing that shows zones, groups, daemons for that particular realm.
Yeah. Okay, so just only show the real name and put selected realm instead of object gateway. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
and that's the same for users and buckets. Because you're going to have multiple zones per realm and multiple daemons per zone. And so it's not the gateway that you're selecting, it's the realm.
Yeah, but for example, in the scenario you mentioned that you have, for example, several daemons for several zones in the same realm. How do you reflect, apart from at least the daemon name should be there, right?
No, I think, well, it's clear if you look at those users tab or the buckets tab. Like if you go here, it should be realm because each realm has its own independent namespace of users. So the users aren't associated with a daemon, they're associated with an entire realm, and each realm has lots of users and lots of daemons. And so here it should clearly be realm at the top.
But then I have a question.
Yeah.
Provided we have, for example, this realm has 2 zone groups, and each zone group has 2 zones. If we have, for example, 1 daemon per zone, it would be 4 daemons running the same realm. Should we then hide 3 daemons and only run the primary zone, or should we show the 4 realm because you want to connect to? Right now, you can connect to any daemon that is running.
I see.
Provided the right credentials.
It depends what you're trying to do, but there are certainly applications where we would like to see all the daemons running, and so you can see that they're there and make observations about them depending on what activity you're performing.
I think for the purposes of viewing users,
though, right?
Yeah, users are associated with realms. So you only want to check the realm, and we don't care which daemon you talk to get the list of users. Like that's pick a realm.
I agree with that.
Okay, and I think the same thing on the daemons page. Same thing. Users and buckets work the same. Like they're nested under there. But daemons also, like this is listing multiple daemons, and so it still seems like it should say realm. And then it should show all of the zones, and then under the zones all the daemons. Like it should be a 2-level tree essentially that shows you all this stuff for that realm. And again, it doesn't matter like which daemon we talk to in order to get that information to display it. Like we just want to actually see what the view of the world is, I guess.
View of the world is complicated also because it's unlikely that all of the zones in your realms are going to be on this cluster. You're only going to have probably 1 from each.
Yeah, or I mean, whatever. I guess whatever we can show. Like it would be. It seems like this should be. You should further around. You should be able to like see the zone groups and the zones like structurally how they look, and then. I mean, maybe it's in a separate tab that shows like for any zones that happen to exist in this cluster, like what are the daemons in that zone.
One of the features to deliver a topology viewer for when you have a cluster and you have multi-site configured, we want to provide a topology view so you can see exactly, this is on our queue list. And this was related to the ability, for example, because after topology viewer would come the multi-site configuration from dashboard, and then it's when we need either a wrapper for the Rados Gateway admin command or enriching the admin ops API in order to be able to create zones on groups realms through the admin ops API. But I don't know if that is possible or could be possible, or we should go for the wrapper.
Maybe someday that lives in Ceph ADM, but I don't know. Generally, if you're talking to a RGW's admin API, it's running in the context of its own zone, and so it's going to have trouble doing multi-site configuration stuff outside of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's a slightly related discussion about maybe we table that for a minute. Just a couple other comments on the dashboard here. Like, I wonder if on the left it says object gateway. I wonder if that should just say object or object storage, because you're talking about the whole service, not talking about an individual.
Object storage probably better than more than object alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it almost, and it's for this daemon view, like, I mean, maybe even it's like which zone, like on a per zone view, then you see all the daemons under the zone. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, we should probably sit down with one of the RGW folks and just sort of brainstorm how this should be laid out a little bit, but it might not make sense until you have that view that shows the whole realm view with how the zone groups topology or whatever should fit together.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah, maybe this becomes the topology page where it's drop downs for each realm, and then a drop down for zone groups and zones and daemons under those.
Yeah. Okay.
There are certain operations that you can only do against specific zones, like the master zone, right? Like, so that needs to keep in mind. Not everything can be done on every zone. And also, I don't know, stuff like bootstrapping might be an issue.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, need to bigger discussion here, I think.
Yeah, maybe one last comment, because this was coming up for Ceph ADM as well. We had this whole discussion about a year ago with creating Rook CRDs to bootstrap multi-site, and we settled on basically a CRD that creates a zone or whatever zone group realm in one site as like the first instance of it, and then another one where you just specify a URL pointing to the first one, and that bootstraps the secondary sites, tertiary sites. I wonder if the question I had for Ceph ADM is whether we should just basically mimic that exact same pattern in the orchestrator API and in Ceph ADM, and then surface that in the dashboard so that you have something here where you would say like create new realm, and it would push that down to Rook or Ceph ADM or whatever to create the new realm in the current cluster, and or like link to existing realm where you put in a URL for some external cluster, you just paste in the URL, and it goes and ties the two together.
Yeah, something like that makes sense.
The one thing I was hoping to hear from somebody someday was whether people have used the Rook CRDs and whether they worked well for them, so that we know whether that it's something that we should just assume is what we want and replicate it and bring it all the way through the orchestrator API and into the dashboard, or whether we need to make any revisions first. I don't know if anybody has any experience or knows if anybody's actually used it yet. But maybe this can go on the list of like top level whatever deliverables that we want to look at from this like top-down perspective of like the end goal is to have this dashboard on the panel where you can create a new realm, and this dashboard where you paste in the URL to another cluster and have the whole thing come out. Plumb it all the way through for all the pieces.
This would require a dedicated meeting, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Just want to plant the seed.
Okay, so that's all regarding this demo from our side. I don't know if there's any left last comments or suggestions. If not, we'll stop sharing.
Maybe the daemons view should expose like a URL directly to a gateway so that you can point a S3 client at it and use it directly. I'm not sure exactly how to find that information otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also user credentials.
on the user's
would be
panel,
nice. Like, yeah, on the user panel to create credentials. Remove.
Yeah.
For the daemon, you mean?
Separately on the user's
Separate.
panel.
Right.
Yeah, although
Harder
that's more of a user story, right? Not an admin. But...
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Right there.
Sorry. If you create a user, you can auto generate key, or not. You can set. Is that what you were looking for?
And if you go back,
Yep.
if you look at an existing user, can you view the keys? I think that's what he meant. Do the drop down.
Yeah, you can do it here.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right. Now there's the whole management API versus user interface that we are not really there, right? But some of that might reflect user operations. Like a user would want to be able to look at their own keys, for example, or something. There's a subset of that. But that's another discussion, I would assume.
Yeah, we've had that discussion in the past, whether the dashboard would be suitable for having this kind of multi-tenanted view, so every user could access the dashboard. But yeah, it is not clear if this is the best fit for the dashboard, because it's more of a management view rather than a sub-user or a tenanted view on the different resources. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to the next one is one that I put in about alternate bucket indexing schemes, but I think this was mostly open-ended for Matt since he's been looking at a couple of these. We've been interested in the new SQLite stuff, considering using it for a bucket index. Matt, have you done any more investigation there? Do you think it's viable?
I haven't actually done more interactive testing, but the performance reports we've seen from Patrick suggest that it's not implausible.
So you read data into the client, do some stuff in memory, and then page it back out? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that'd be the model. I mean, I think it would have to be Matt. It would have to. I think this model would have to assume that we had a single point of control in a group in an RGW group, and had the ability to do remote operations on a particular bucket, that index, for example, or other index. But I think that's not impossible. It isn't the only way we could proceed, but I think it's a plausible direction to explore, and it matches up with two things that are being worked on. One, D4N, which is the next generation of the MOC D3N cache. And it has a Redis directory and other, and D3N already has remote operations of different, that are just strictly S3 API. But we're working on a couple different projects that put other kinds of group communications into place. Or Friedman is working on MQ-based communications, and the Redis in D4N itself is an example. And Eric Ivancic is working on Aeroflight interfaces. Experimental Aeroflight interface to data in S3, potentially formatted with S3 select or pre-restricted with S3 select. Those interfaces are exposed over GS or RPC. But anyways, I think this family of solutions would be ones where we try to allow RGWs to claim a bucket index for a period of time, and have the other RGWs coordinate to use it.
Just take a step back from implementation there. Can we reiterate why people are interested in improving bucket index? There's a group of us that are here from DigitalOcean because we've been looking at this as a upcoming one of the next hurdles that we have, and one of the things we have at the moment is on really large customer buckets, index performance is just terrible. Like listing.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Robin. But yes, that is why. That is one of the primary reasons why we would choose to do it. It's because it is demoralizing performance.
So I was going to say, at 200 million objects, one list call can take more than a second, and we have a trade-off here. We can make access faster. We can make list
put a pin in listing though, because there are other ways to deal with listing, and Amazon S3 APIs have some new features to support.
The problem is that we can't force the customers to use them.
Well, yes, you can.
Well,
customers will select to use them. Both are important, but I think our key goal is to improve, make performance more symmetrical, provide much better index CRUD performance on indexes. For listing, we want to improve it, but there is a peak at which we can tolerate. The API has issues with performance. Remember that the upstream bucket inventory is a thing where an implementation of bucket inventory is planned in my team. But there's great interest in it from what we can tell from our downstream sort of quote unquote customers. That suggests, and I can explain that from what I've seen of those inquiries, there's a strong ecosystem developing within the AWS community to use them to consume bucket inventories via Parquet or primarily, and build workflows around them. People already have attached things that'll consume those workflows, either serverless functions or Spark or Hadoop or something, and so it's reasonable to consider. Expecting applications to learn how to use bucket inventory.
Okay, so you want to direct things there, but I want to ask.
Well, it has a huge performance advantage for us.
Yes, beyond just the listing performance, are there concerns with the indexes that other people have?
What do you mean?
I'm asking other people. Are there concerns beyond listing performance that are prevalent in the community?
General OMAP performance has been an issue when a particular OSD gets a whole lot of OMAP keys on it, whether from just having too many buckets or shards that have too many entries, or from multi-site bucket index log entries can fill up.
Right, the RocksDB implementation of OMAP is really asymmetrical for adds and deletes. Deletes are very expensive and induce compactions.
Yes, it seems like we want to shift away from OMAP if we can. That's one thing that we want to do. But maybe I'm not sure. That's a SQLite thing. Is the panacea there?
Yeah, I'm not claiming it's a panacea either. I think it's something we should explore.
So Matt, you've also done some design work on like a B tree or B plus tree implementation for bucket index that can split instead of reshard.
I have.
Any thoughts on that?
I've vacillated over 2 years about whether I like blending these things together. I have concerns that that doing this in a with CLS operations is really sensible. There are a lot of different boundary conditions, a lot of different but also as much complexity in managing splits and merges as in any general purpose buffer-based B-tree system, and it strongly appeals to me to reuse code. And that's an emphasis. I think Patrick's remarks on that were one of the things that made me want to look at his work. If you use something else, I'd still like to use reuse code. And reuse high quality code that's buffer based is sensible, whether it's SQLite or something else. There are other wholesale approaches, but go ahead.
My specific issue with SQLite is what you mentioned, that you need to have a lock on the bucket, like you cannot have multiple. And it's kind of against the Ceph baseline premise where you don't want to lock.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it is, but I think that this is an area we've gone down a rat hole. But there are theorems in computing in distributed computing that would lend us to consider doing it. Single point of control type of things. It's not desirable to simply scale the number, to just simply raise the number of clients and say everybody's going to do restart, try restarts. That'll have a negative exponential performance. There will be people in exponential backoff to deal with that. We're not going to enjoy the performance of that. So potentially we should look at a request routing solution instead. At least that's my hypothesis right
now. Maybe, we need to investigate that, right?
Well, but I'm also both are acceptable guy. I'm not trying to stop people from doing other work or trying other things entirely. That make index APIs a thing in the product that we can elaborate different ways.
I would love to see some kind of a B+3 over Rados implementation, but it's having done that FIFO thing, and other related stuff, it's not trivial, not going to be trivial, but it might be that's something that is needed.
And the bucket index has some extra requirements that complicate splitting based on the buffers. Basically, the way that versioned objects work, versions have to be linked together, and you have to be able to access them and write them atomically on the same OSD, at least currently.
Well, currently, but that, some of that stuff can be constructed, or, can find different solutions for that while we're doing it, right? It's not necessarily the...
Yeah, but it's a requirement that's going to complicate the design.
There are a lot of things that are going to complicate the design.
well, again, that's a vote in favor of things that support transactions but are robust off the shelf, to be honest.
Yeah, but do you want to have big kernel lock, or do you want to have granular locks? That's
Why you keep saying this? But I guess. I don't think you necessarily have big kernel lock. You could take a single index could potentially take advantage of only so much parallelism in a single cluster. The fact that bucket indexes or indices are naturally partitioned, and all of those can be going in parallel. And there's a second piece that comes in if you actually, I admit this has its trade-offs, but the wins column are single point of control and cache locality.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, playing.
Yeah, but both are helpful. In the other direction, the solutions look quite different. And it's also worth mentioning the work going on in I guess Santa Cruz, sort of, and the other database stuff is kind of pushing. It isn't really providing solutions for this problem. We have looked at the Skyhook stuff, and it's sort of focusing on columnar data.
Right. That was like Postgres or something.
In OSDs, but as a kind of a virtual Postgres accessor to it, but columnar data and specific OSDs.
This strikes me as a subject where we can talk ourselves circles for several
yes,
hours.
Sure.
Do we have a plan for how how we're going to make progress here? I mean, we can say we're going to investigate, like, are there specific projects in flight, or are we like talking to grad students who want to look at these things, or like what's the plan of action? Solve some of these questions.
Yeah, what can we deliver, even if it's only conceptually, for Quincy?
Well, I don't know yet. It's a good question.
Is the sqlite viable?
Well, I think it's. I think we're at a point where we could begin testing that. We could begin testing the scalability of different parameters of that. And there's also merge points for code that would go with that. Like the D4N stuff. We're attempting to merge D4N in 21 for Quincy.
Even when you have request routing, I guess, right? That's when SQLite becomes an option.
I think so. I think without it, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But parts of request routing could be present in Quincy. I do think that because there are areas because D3N already has it, because D4N would essentially has it. There are being different ways of doing it just with D4N alone, and some of what or Friedman's work should also merge. But I think the routing really is most believably. I think D3N is essentially already doing that.
The code the RGW code needs to support multiple index types, right? So
and that as well.
There needs to be some groundwork happening there before anything.
Yeah. I think we should commit to, and I can commit to resourcing it. That work, the index type work, certainly in 21 also. We should begin doing along those lines.
We do have some groundwork from the bucket layout types for abstraction there.
Oh, from multi-site resharding?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's very good. But I would certainly be interested in talking to students or others who would be interested in helping or doing their own projects that overlap with this space. Such as maybe Carlos's students, if there's interested students over there, since they've done overlapping work. I'd certainly love to talk to them. I think what you did and others would too. I don't know if any of those people are on this are here, but if you are here,
I don't think so.
All right. Well, going back to listing real quick before we move on, I just wanted to mention that we also support the unordered listing, which can be a big speed up for large buckets as long as the client can use the extension to request it. But I think you've all made a repo under Ceph somewhere that lets you plug in a file to Bodo and use the Python to request unordered listing. Next, was this usage unified RGW CLI?
Yeah, I kind of dropped this into last minute. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I just wanted to have a quick discussion around what the big picture goal is, so that we can at least start inching in the right direction. So the sort of superficial goal is just to bring all of the RGW admin commands under the Ceph CLI, which basically just means making the manager able to do all those commands. That's reasonably easy to implement. In fact, the manager was already shelling out to do Radios Gateway admin for a bunch of other random tasks. Maybe not a bunch, a few random tasks for Ceph ADM. And because it's all containerized, we always know we have the right version and where it's located and all that stuff. So I think that part is easy, but I think this kind of relates to the question that kept coming up in the dashboard section also around the admin API, where there's like a chicken and egg problem about setting up realms and zones when you don't have an endpoint, a Radios Gateway daemon running yet that you can connect to its API. I'm just wondering does it make sense that we want to move some of this functionality into the manager so that manager modules can do things like manipulate realms and zones and the zone configuration stuff. I don't know. I don't really understand the full landscape here of like what the current issues are, challenges, and like where we actually want to go. Maybe somebody can give me like a really quick summary of what the status is.
Casey, you want to go with this? Like
a problem.
Status from the manager dashboard side, or from RGW's perspective here,
or from I guess from RGW's either. Like I just keep hearing this issue come up around where the management API is running and what that particular, like it's a Radius gateway, we have a Radius gateway process, but it's only running in one zone, and so it can't do. I don't know. I don't really understand what the constraints are and what the current problems are that we're hitting.
Well, there are multiple issues, right? First, you have this one big monolithic admin command line tool called Radius Gateway Admin that's really way overdue, refactoring. And it's like pretty embarrassing how it looks like, but it kind of works for us right now. And it's going to be huge work to break it down into, something more modular, and that would actually make more sense. So that's one thing. Now, creating RESTful interfaces out of that is kind of challenging because, or maybe not necessarily, like I'm not sure. I know there have been some discussions, but you need to refactor that before you do anything. And
well, maybe, although some previous refactoring discussions have focused a lot on command processing, abstractions, and perhaps that could be bypassed if we focused on turning it into a RESTful, into RESTful services building, which I think AdminOps is basically already doing.
Right. So AdminOps does that, but AdminOps work it's very partial. Right? So getting all the commands that Radius Gateway Admin is doing now into that.
And also it
would be challenging.
Can't move bootstrapping stuff into that.
Right, and
requires a gateway to be up with users to.
Okay, but that's a different problem. And to be fair, that we could separate out a lot of things, right? The bootstrapping for one side and some similar pieces or orchestration pieces. Those maybe need a full refactoring and to be pulled out into something flexible. But the other pieces, the pieces that are simply day two operations of many different kinds, those things maybe should be migrating towards AdminOps.
Right.
What is AdminOps?
The Radius Gateway Admin RESTful API. No, stop.
The management API.
Management API. The one we did like 7-8 years ago. I don't think it evolved that much since. Like we do it stuff from time to time, but
there's definitely projects you'd want to do around it, but it's a credible effort. It supports some, it has security, it supports some management delegation also.
Right. So
like you can apply caps to users.
Like it seems to me that the way to go though would be it would require like big refactoring, and as Casey mentioned, not everything can be even pushed there to AdminOps because it involves bootstrapping stuff. Now you ask about why certain things cannot run against certain zones, because stuff like user creation, while you can do it on every zone, only the master zone is the one that pushes all the distributes the metadata. So certain things need to happen on the master zone, of the master zone group at the moment. So So there needs to be some work there if you want to change it.
I mean, that said, we already have the ability to forward stuff to the master internally, so we could just do that.
Yeah,
Right.
It would require
some
that the
of
master be
admin-
actually running, but
Right.
you ought to be able to connect to any RGW and forward to the master.
That's true.
I believe that some of the admin APIs will forward, but not all of them. So that
Not
would be
all of
something to look at.
Yeah. But again, it requires work.
Like,
So that's the status.
Another issue, I think, at least relating to the manager and Ceph RGW commands, is kind of Python versus C++. And I think our team has been more on the C++ side. But there's still some refactoring that we could do to make it easier to consume.
So I mean, I guess my, maybe to pose this as a more concrete question, from a user experience perspective, does it make sense to move maybe only some of the commands under Rados Gateway Admin? Maybe all of them, I don't know, but maybe starting with some of them under the Ceph CLI, like maybe just starting with those related to managing the realm configuration type stuff, creating realms, zones and zone groups and so on. Even if the initial implementation of that is just shelling out to Rados Gateway Admin, it would put that under the purview of the manager module. Like, I guess the parallel I'm thinking of here is the volumes module, where we basically tied the creation of a Ceph file system to spinning up the daemons that actually serve that file system by moving things around managing realms and zones into the manager. Even if for some of the parts we're either calling into a library or shelling out to Rados Gateway Admin, we can tie that to also just starting up the daemons as part of the whole process. So you just say like, create realm, create zone, and then everything comes up all at once. Does that make sense? And might that be sort of a direction to go in terms of if there is a refactoring of the admin API stuff that has to happen anyway, moving to a model where some of the stuff is hosted by the manager as opposed to by a Rados Gateway daemon?
I think that's more of a user experience question. Like will users it will be easier for users to do it through some of the commands through the Ceph CLI or in some of the gateway admin commands. Like, I'm not sure you like you want to have stuff managing Rados Gateway Admin at the same place, it seems to me. But where is that place? Not necessarily Rados Gateway Admin, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about creation of zones and deployment of gateways for it, I'm still unclear on the division between like Ceph RGW commands and Ceph ADM itself.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the volumes, I mean, the orchestrator interface defines the manager internal API for just deploying the daemons, both for metadata servers for the file system or for Rados Gateway stuff. The way that the volumes module works is it does all the fiddling with creating the file system and maybe if it's a sub volume, creating the directories and setting up caps on it and all that random stuff. That's specific to file systems. And then at the very end, there's like one line that just does a remote call into the orchestrator module to go create a deployment of daemons to serve that file system that it just set up. So I would imagine that we would do something similar where if for example, we just took the realm related management commands and mapped them to Ceph CLI commands, then it'd be something like Ceph RGW create realm, and then Ceph RGW create zone under realm foo. And when you do that, it would initially just shell out to Rados Gateway to create that zone, and then it would call into the orchestrator to go create those daemons all in one go. And then whatever the dashboard experience would be, which maybe is what we might be the sort of the driving UX flow, whatever, for deciding this, it would go and create, it would do the same thing. It would call those same APIs internal to the manager.
It could be that there is a space for Redis gateway admin. There's still, you want to have that, but the Ceph CLI could do like scripting on top of it, like higher level commands, right? Nowadays, to create a new realm or a zone in a new realm, you have like at least 3 to 5 commands that you need to run, right? You need to create the realm, create the zone group, create the zone, create a user for synchronization, set the endpoints, and everything. So all of that, like,
we also want to consider the Ceph REST API. We have that in the dashboard, uses that to interact with most of the cluster. Maybe that's a place where some of this should live.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm imagining, right now the dashboard lets you create users, but there's this issue of making sure you're talking to the right zone master or whatever for the realm to do that. Like my understanding is that right now the dashboard module is basically has all that logic, so it's actually going out and calling out to the RGW admin API. If we just shift that down a little bit into like an RGW module in the manager, then we could expose that same functionality through the Ceph CLI, so you could have a Ceph RGW user create that knows where to do it, which zone to talk to, do the right thing.
Yeah, just a comment from dashboard side. For the multi-site or multi-daemon support, and Alfonso, I think is still online. What we have to do is configure, I think, multiple keys for each user. So currently the user manually has to enter, or the admin has to manually enter in a module option, a dictionary with the mappings between the keys and the different daemons. That's the way we're currently doing, and not very friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we retrieve the daemon list from the service map. And then we rely on the dashboard settings about you provided the access key and the secret key. We don't have any other way to retrieve these credentials, but from the user. Well, the admin that set it up.
Yeah, it seems like something that we should be doing. Be a little bit more seamless, I guess. Anyway, maybe this is something we should defer to another meeting or something. But
well, I think we do need to spend time this year in at least breaking down Redis gateway admin into lots of logical units or something, and build on top of that. And then.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We can probably move on.
All right. Next on the agenda is cache with a question mark. I assume this is talking about MLC's work, either D3N or D4N.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone here that specific walkthroughs of any of those pieces, but D3N is almost merged. It'll be in Pacific, I believe, won't it? Eventually, Casey, and some Pacific. And then D4N would follow on its heels in 21. It's doing more robust metadata and different kinds of cache strategies. Its primary mode right now is one has a Redis directory that can manage cache state. There's a student project to integrate this with S3 Select so that S3 Select can operate on data that's cached, and that appears to work. Right now, D4N, unlike D3N, stores its materialized caches on another RGW S3 substrate. I think probably converging it with D3N is something we do while upstreaming it. But the authors of that aren't here, so I don't want to drill too much into all that. But that's the thing that's being worked on. That is
okay.
Approaching maturity.
Yeah, I haven't had much visibility into that could we find, I don't know, maybe there's existing documents that talk about the design and how it works that we could share upstream?
Yeah, there are extensive slide decks and presentations and a paper being worked on for FAST 21. But I will reach out to Ur and see whether she'd be willing to share some specific things and maybe do a CDM talk.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay. Yeah, and Mark has been working hard to get the D3N cache stuff ready for merge. And so I am eager to see that merge to master and make it to Pacific. Next up then is Zipper. Maybe we should just kind of recap the current status and what the next step is before talking about eventual goals for Quincy. Dan,
Sure.
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. So current status is that the first pass API and implementation is complete. The first non-Rados backend, which is based on SQLite, and it's called DB Store, is under development, and it's finding issues that, of course, were missed in the first pass of the API, which is expected. That hopefully will be done within the next month or so, and then we'll be able to do a reasonable subset of RGW operations on this store. We're not implementing, for example, we're not implementing multiple instances or multiple zones or anything like that. It'll only be single RGW in the first pass. But within that context, you should be able to do just about everything RGW does. The next step beyond that is to implement the first transformation layer, which will be a Lua transformation layer. And that should get us all of the basics that we need to declare ourselves to be fully feature complete. Because at that point, we will have implemented non-Rados versions of everything we need to implement. So that's current status and sort of near future development.
Cool. And I do remember in these kind of intermediate layers, we've talked about moving our caches into that potentially.
Yep.
At least the metadata cache and then potentially the data cache from D3N.
Yeah,
yep.
I think
that is a desired goal, let's say, not quite a plan yet, but somewhere between a goal and a plan.
There's also the submission by, I think it's IBM Research folks upstream, that they call it S3 mirror, but it's basically that there's basically a redirection layer that they insert into the RGW process in order to have requests go to a remote S3. It would be nice to maybe relocate that into a zipper layer.
All right. And I'd also mention that Caleb has been working on making this zipper pluggable, basically moving the Rados backend into a shared library so that we can basically load them as plugins and eventually potentially have external ones plugged in.
Yep.
I think there's a lot more to talk about in terms of API stability for things like that. At least originally, it's going to be pretty tightly coupled to upstream.
Yeah, I mean, the plan is once we've reached what we think to be a stable level, then we can start doing actual versioned APIs. And so you'll be able to develop against a particular version of the API, and you'll know when the API changes in a non-compatible way, because the version will change. So then that should help support out-of-tree implementations. And at some point, we'll probably want to commit to a particular version for a particular Ceph release set. But that's something we'll have to talk about in the future.
Cool. Well, I look forward to getting more experience with the APIs and improving their shape as we work on other backends or filter layers. Anybody else with thoughts on Zypper? Next, we have bucket inventory, which Matt already mentioned. This is a Amazon feature that is meant to optimize bucket listings for large buckets, basically by, I guess, making kind of in another bucket, a condensed form of the bucket's contents that you can search through with something like S3 select.
I don't recall whether it has to be another bucket or I don't think so. But the nominated objects can be accessed also direct. They're special Parquet or ORC or BSV, I guess, objects. Or I think we would want to do Parquet. But we have to find the main topics will be how we want to frame that code, the code that does this in RGW offline workflow. Basically, the notion is similar, a little bit similar to lifecycle. There, like you set up a schedule of as it's an optional thing. You set up a schedule of inventory construction daily or weekly on a bucket. So we needed to agree on an implementation strategy for the asynchronous work to spool them off and presumably manage their lifecycle. Although some retention policies and things would be natural, that things lifecycle could do, but I don't know how AWS handles that. But for internally, we need to have some agree on ways to do that asynchronous processing, and including that processing is doing something rather. We talked about it, referring it to probably be RGW internal, but there's probably more discussions about that. There's some people who proposed that it should just be something outside running in a serverless function that goes and does this. Some things that construct a complex structured storage object like Parquet are a little bit heavyweight.
Okay. Well, if everything that this background process would need to read and write the data can be exposed through S3, then it could make sense to live outside of RGW.
It definitely could. It's sort of, but it's definitely a fairly relatively intrinsic feature of RGW. So we have to really whatever it is that versus require it. We pretty much have to love it, want to deploy it and things like that. Or
cool. Other than work on Parquet, is there other stuff that we need from S3 Select to be able to support that?
Again, it doesn't need S3 Select, although people might use it. Like you could use S3 Select to talk to it, but it's just a Parquet. As with S3 Select targets, and there's no connection with S3 Select, although you could use it, right? It just writes ordinary, in this case Parquet objects to a magical location. It's a well-known heuristic location. So no, it just has to be able to write Parquet and understand the naming conventions and permissions that should be on it.
Got it. Okay, other thoughts here? Next up is RGW Dedup. Do we have somebody that wanted to talk about this?
You, Yehuda?
Matt, you wanna?
Well, I'm just saying. I'm using too much. I'm spending too much time on forward-looking statements, but I've been discussing this with Yehuda. I'd like to see us tackle this and begin making progress towards application in RGW, and I've talked with Yehuda with the most part about it. My understanding, the precursor to this is the Ceph as a whole has been developing dedup primitives, but my understanding is of them is twofold. One, that there probably won't be a full-fledged implementation of the pooling of the stacked pool model of full duplication model in Rados that's being proposed. It might be. That also, when it does exist, might be a bit different from the style of operation that RGW would want, but as well, since we have a lot of schema operations and so forth in the RGW layer. But on the other hand, we would like to use the primitives that have been worked on, the fast CDC fingerprinting work that you did say seems. I think it's based on what I can tell is a potentially large contribution. It doesn't seem to be something that's widely available in industry and right now. And I'm not sure about that, but that's my impression. It seems like it has a lot of advantages over commercial components, mostly 10 or 15 years old now, and so I was very excited to use that. But I've been talking with Yehuda about the possibility of doing an offline dedup that leveraged perhaps the same technology we would use for bucket indexes, but as a discrete on-demand index mechanism. That would employ fast CDC those indexes and some extension to current Ceph object manifests and to accomplish a dedup solution at the RGW layer. I don't have a diagram. I could present one for a future meeting. That's the general line of development I've been thinking about.
Cool.
Right. The idea was like to have an offline process that go over the data, get fingerprinting that's needed, mutates the existing objects in a way such that they point at the pieces that are duplicate. So there needs to be some kind of a way to represent those in the new representation of the object through the object manifest somehow. Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, and we would use ref counting similar to tail chunks to clean things up. Would that work?
That would be the idea as a first cut because we have it already and it's well tested.
So on the Rados side of things, if you ignore RGW for a second and just think about the Rados half, there's basically two parts of it. There's the actual storage pool that has all the content addressable object fragments and ref counts on them. All the infrastructure, as far as I can tell, exists for that to all work. There's the chunking algorithm to decide how to choose your boundaries, and then there's an efficient ref count class that lets you have complete back pointers for small numbers of ref counts, and as the number of refs increases, it sort of degrades in accuracy, fixed size, like blob of reference counts, essentially. All that stuff is there. The Rados half, to have a Rados tier that takes a Rados object and transparently puts it into a bunch of chunks, is like half implemented, maybe 2/3 implemented, but needs a lot of work. I wouldn't rely on that. And the advantage of that is that it can be used in place of any user of Rados, and it serves as the indirection layer. In RGW's case, because you already have an indirection layer, you're already hitting a gateway and you already have a manifest. Rely on that Rados, or else you're having multiple pops. So the big question in my mind is really, can the RGW manifest behave well for a large object, say, when you have lots of little chunks? Like, what are the scaling ramifications, and
well,
do we need to worry
need to have some kind of an indirection, another layer of indirection. So the manifest itself should point at something else that represents that. Like, I don't think we should. The current manifest as it is could scale.
Okay, I guess that was my question.
In what sense?
In the sense that it's like one generic piece that we keep in a 512K head object. That's it.
I mean, can it be bigger than 512K?
No, it's not even that. It's like part of the attributes on the head. So it's not. So it
can be quite large. But you're saying you think it'll reach a size limit. That's the main issue, because obviously it's polymorphic, so it can have any type. Yeah. But you'd like to develop a sidecar structure with that.
It's the extended attributes on the 512K object, right?
I see. Okay.
No, understood. But although formac or whatever that object is these days by default, but okay.
But the manifest is the attribute and not the content of the object. So yeah, there'd have to be some other scheme, I guess. I mean, it really depends on how small you make your chunks. And it's sort of a trade-off. Like, the smaller your chunks are, the better your dedupe ratios are, but the higher the metadata overhead is, and the worse the read performance is. And so my sort of gut feeling is that we'd want chunks that are like on the order of like a megabyte or half a megabyte or something like that. Like, not too small, but not too big either. In which case, the manifest could be pretty big for a large S3 object.
Right.
We have lots of these things.
Yeah. Like, assuming that all the chunk, like the original RGW manifest was doing something like, was just like a list of Rados objects.
Do that. Now it's like
now it's a shorthand, right? There's an algorithm, and so we'll need to take that into account. And it might be that we can have something similar to what we have now, but then in cases where it's getting too big, then we say, okay, the definitions are in that object, right? Some other Rados object.
Yeah, or the head. Like, could you have a scheme so that the manifest attribute says that the head is actually a list of all the chunk names?
Yeah, potentially.
I'm not sure.
Doesn't sound crazy.
You want to shoot, like, you'd need to change the way
that moves them out of OMAP, which is another.
Yeah.
It's like a code factoring issue, I think, right?
So if we're going to have some background process do the fingerprinting and dedupe stuff, then it would have to modify the head object in place, right, where it's currently immutable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it could be preferable to store that outside of the head so that the head stays atomic.
Well, you create new head at the end, right? You create something, and then at the end you do the final write. It's not different than changing echoes or copying something in, like overwriting the same object with itself, basically. Just end up pointing at new manifest at the end. So the final write is atomic when you do that.
Okay.
Setting aside the on-disk format changes, is making it offline significantly simplify things? Like, would it be that hard to make it so that as you're streaming data from the client, it chunks as it goes, writes out the chunks, and at the very end writes a chunked manifest?
My experience is limited, but my impression from existing practice in industry is that online systems are significantly more expensive to operate, or it ends up being very resource intensive and makes ingest more expensive.
Yeah, I feel like being able to stream out 4 meg blocks to Rados has been really good for performance. So I think it would be nice to keep that.
I mean, nothing prevents someone from experimenting with it, but if I had to pick one of 2 modes, and I talked about this with a number of people, and everyone preferred, if they had only one mode, it would be out of line.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Robin sent a question. You want to clarify it? Copy by reference, dedup during copy object requests.
Sure, in the decision.
I can expand on that. If there are a lot of copy object requests on existing data copying to a new object, for example, people doing things with Docker image layering, having the ability to just have the references there is really cheap to detect the duplication. We just need to store a reference, which I see as fundamentally similar to this deduplication system because it has to build references.
It's like linking a new object instead of copying the data, you mean?
Yes, but then you have to reference count it later when deletion happens.
That's what we do currently with copy object, right? We only copy the head and create increase the reference for the tail. So it would essentially behave similarly.
Yeah, we do get deduplication in this case currently. You probably knew that, I think, Robin, or if there's flipped.
I need to go and check because I'm definitely seeing the usage increase more than it should if we do that presently. I will go and verify that and come back to us.
If not, well, there are cases when we don't do that, like
across storage classes, for example.
Across storage classes, across regions.
We certainly do it across buckets because that's been a challenge for Eric and
we do it across buckets, yeah.
Let me go and verify that, especially because some of it's on older clusters.
It's been like that since.
I'm going to verify it. No, then
for
an IRC.
At least 10 years, so I don't know. But, there might be a bug.
All right. I think we can add this as an agenda item for our RGW refactoring calls to keep up with it.
Yep.
Next, I added a link to an old email of mine about a design for resharding without blocking writes. This was kind of just in relation to the discussion about other bucket indexing schemes, OMAP performance, reshard performance. There's been some discussions about resharding on very large buckets taking a long time and disrupting clients. Essentially, it does have to write every single key to a new shard, so it's linear in time. So I do still think there's room for this project of non-blocking reshards.
What are the next steps to help move it forward?
The idea essentially was that while a reshard is going, every index transaction would write to both the old index and the new index. That's all I have on this, unless anybody else has comments or is interested in helping. All right, and the next one I had added about pool creation. Basically, when RGW creates its own pools, the monitor may not have room and so can return an error. And that's been hard for users to make sense of and debug. I think it came up yesterday in the Rados session, an idea of relying on the autoscaler to create pools with very few PGs or one, just to make sure they can succeed, and then rely on the autoscaler to make sure the PG nums are sane. I'm not a big fan of that for RGW's data pools or index pools, where we do want some scalability parallelism by default. So I think it might make sense to move this pool creation into the deployment so that it either all succeeds or all fails up front.
I think that would certainly help. But there's also a discussion around the secondary mode for the autoscaler where it actually does try to use the full budget of PGs for the entire cluster from the get-go. So you do get a full level of parallelism for things like data pools. And then perhaps have like some cap on the metadata pools like for RGW and Ceph so that they don't use like a whole bunch of PGs that they don't need.
But say that RGW is trying to create a data pool when there isn't really budget for it. Would it still fail in that case, or how would that help?
The idea is that the monitor check would go away, so we would, or effectively never be hit anymore. So once you create a data pool, it would just start out with one PG, but if you specify a higher number, or even if you don't, the autoscaler will give it a higher allocation once you create the pool. So essentially, the neural algorithm is respecting like the target size parameters that already exist. If you set those, and if you don't set those, it's dividing the rest of the PG budget evenly among the pools.
Okay. So you think you do think it's still reasonable for RGW to create pools online and expect them to succeed?
Yeah, I think that it's more reasonable to expect that to work well with this new autoscaler behavior that we're working on. Like in the past, the issue was that those pools would be created automatically with a minimum number of PGs and then wouldn't have enough parallelism. But with the new behavior of the autoscaler, that shouldn't be a problem. They'll get the much higher level of parallelism out of the gate.
Maybe we're missing some command that would check, do some sanity check about the state, or something. You know, you said it was hard to identify what was the underlying issue. Maybe we're missing a way to for users to check.
Well, I think the problem was we had essentially an obsolete check in the monitor with the autoscaler running in. These days, we don't actually need a lot of the checks that we used to have. These kinds of things.
Okay. The only time that you would want to recreate pools is if you wanted a specific like EC configuration, for example.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to recreate the pools, but I don't think we need to remove the auto creation. And in fact, it'll work better in Quincy, and we'll probably backward this to Pacific as well.
That sounds great. Thanks, Josh.
No problem. Thanks for bringing it up.
All right. Last thing was from Blaine on the Rook and the bucket claims. Is there more to discuss here? I think we still have time.
Is Blaine still here?
Actually, I think you must have dropped.
All right. Anybody want to raise anything else?
Matt, is it one topic maybe, or go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask Matt, do you think it's worth mentioning any of the metrics stuff, or?
I guess I would like to, yeah, but I didn't frame it as a topic very effectively at all.
Yeah, I guess Jason not being part of the team kind of changes some of that too.
Well, something we've been wanting to do, it may or may not overlap cleanly, but I had talked with Jason Dillerman in depth a few weeks ago about it. I mean, we're hoping to do is be able to provide more either essentially parameterized performance counters or other, and possibly other metrics, make telemetry from the RGW daemon into eventually into Prometheus more flexible. And it appeared that the work that Jason was doing would have allowed that. I assume it's still continuing, but our needs are slightly different from those that have been framed by Ceph and RBD replication. The main thing we want to be able to do is organize things like counters, but also other variables by parameters, so that we can talk so we can talk about transient or otherwise grouped information. Like examples would be the users that have been operating on the RGW cluster or parts of it at different times, the activity on particular buckets, or the activity from particular S3 clients. Some of the motivation for doing that for us is related to QoS, but another motivation is really just to be able to provide greater observability of what the whole system is doing. And make it available in dashboards, because customers ask for that a lot.
Hey Matt, did you mean to collect it as telemetry data, or is it available internally just for the user to view in the Ceph dashboard?
Well, we started using telemetry as a term to mean phone home information and stuff. By it I meant the internal flow of usage and other activity across the system. Okay. So examples of what I mean are things like currently the counter beacons that are sent to manager for every few minutes.
If you have any metrics that you wish to phone home, I'm passing Etherpad, so yeah.
Understood. But I'm not speaking about phoning home. As you said, I'm speaking about these are all the things I'm talking about are things that are part of the internal management of or maybe a group of them eventually, because multi-site sync behaviors are things people are interested in too.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I'm just mentioning in general. Thanks.
So I had a general topic that I thought we could use some discussion, which was around testing. I mean, we've been discussing lots of very large scale changes to the way RGW is storing things and how it's maintaining data, and even with different backends. Seems like testing is going to be a large component of that. So I was kind of curious. I know S3 test is pretty comprehensive in the API coverage. Does it have a sort of wide test space sampling coverage in terms of like things like one of the things that's been most very effective for RBD and Rados has been having a kind of test that has a model of how the system should look, and running random sequences of operations to explore that space and verify that the model matches the reality. Is that something that exists in the RGW test as well?
I think Eli has left us for today, unless he rejoined and he can answer better than I can. There aren't many layout-based tests in S3 tests today. There are some older tests in the QA section, like the actual QA section, that do poke some parts of layout, but I'm not certain how well those have been updated for new pieces. Maybe other people can comment. I will say for the S3 tests, I proposed a GSOC idea for improving S3 tests, and I've gotten some good student proposals so far, that I hope we will get a slot for them.
That's good. That's good to hear, Robin. Yeah, I wasn't concerned particularly about the layout in particular, but more generalized like coverage of a broader sample of a workload. I mean, RGW has such a rich API; it's a very wide range to cover.
Basically, I think the answer is no. Closest thing they've seen to it recently that was work that Gal Salomon has added to, but it's really for S3 Select. But they're generating test profiles through with randomization, and then freezing them as big inventories of tests that can be rerun with known results, and they can run them against S3, Amazon, any endpoints. They can run them against Amazon, or they can run them against RGW. S3 as a test itself isn't really like that. It's a big inventory of very specific expectations in each test. I think, even though there are some options, there are some parameters, but they don't explore a wide space. I think it would be fair to say.
So is that something that you're looking at then, or is that something that worth exploring?
I mean, the way we sort of deal with it from the point of view from the point of view, to the extent we have a coverage for it, downstream in particular, we cover it with maybe CosBench historically. So the parameters we're trying to explore is a wide, is a bunch of workload characteristics. There's new stuff upstream. The Minio folks have something called Warp. That's a kind of like an amalgam of a bunch of their S3 tests plus a bunch of randomized parameter-based, stuff like that. So for a subset of workloads, those kind of tools cover things, but that's a bit different from I think what you're saying in terms of how Methodology lets you probe all kinds of behavior.
Yeah, like in particular, like CosBench certainly lets you support lots of different types of workloads, but it doesn't support the full extent of like the S3 API, for example.
Exactly. No. So I don't think it's like something we don't have. There's something called Ragweed that you and I could talk more about it, but it's a pretty limited number. It was a test that was designed was a test suite. I think it's a nose test suite that allows you to work with both Rados commands and S3 or other operations if you want to do things and then dig into what's to make sure assertions about what should be present in Rados or other etc. But that's a thing, right? We should probably make more use of, but I don't think we have a thing that does what you're describing.
Yeah, and just so I'm clear, something you're kind of hinting at is something that would tell us how much of the full S3 API we're testing and is covered.
Not so much about it, how much is covered and not, but just something that would explore the space rather than a statically defined set of tests.
So it would be more likely to catch problems with interactions of features rather than the features themselves.
Yeah, I got it. I see.
Or catch different kinds of race conditions that you might not see otherwise. Just having the system in different states and running the same operations against it might produce different results than always starting from the same place with a static set of tests, that sort of thing. Like an example of how this is used in like RBD is the FSX tests, which actually I guess came from a file system test originally, but they're randomly doing different operations on images, like creating snapshots and clones and reads and writes and truncates, deletes, basically all the different kinds of operations that are supported, and then verifying that the state in the cluster matches the expected state in their in-memory model. And that kind of gets you much more coverage for of the general state space of the system that it could be in, than a statically defined set of tests.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this is the sort of thing that our downstream quality engineering people try to do various ways, but they've approached it in terms of writing programs that mix specific things together, like great random number foo of version buckets and great bunches of objects in each one, and then do and apply combinations of lifecycle to them is a type of thing I've seen recently. But yeah, if we had a system to generate a generative approach to produce an inventory of tests to run.
From my experience, the Rados model style tests have been insanely valuable in Rados. They're more valuable than all of the other unit tests put together. I'd also submit that if it's worth doing downstream manually, it's extremely worth doing in Topology.
Yeah, but when I said the downstream does some of it, they don't have automation to do what this sort of thing either.
No, I submit that if it's
Topology knows much more about it than anybody else does.
Doing automatically.
Yeah, I think it's a sound proposal.
Also, Rados model originally took like 2 weeks to write, and it's been added to ever since. It was far less effort than any other testing in Topology, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this warrants further discussion. Sorry, go ahead, Sage.
I was just going to say, it strikes me that the situation is a little bit different. As Josh mentioned sort of at the outset of this, like the challenge with RGW is that the API space is like so expansive and so rich. I'm not sure it'll be significantly more work to write something like Rados model that is a model for like the full S3 API.
Yeah, I agreed. Yeah. I think it's definitely a lot of work.
Yeah.
If you think of the API commands as leaves hanging off of manipulations of underlying structures, if you choose 1 or 2 representative leaves of each corresponding to each of those structures, you get pretty good coverage without needing to get the entire API. The point isn't so much to test the API commands specifically, it's to find ways of manipulating the underlying structures into larger sets of outcomes.
Yep.
I mean, Robin, you mentioned you had a Google Smart Code project to run testing. Would this be something that would fit there?
Sorry, again?
You mentioned you had a Google Smart Code project around improving testing. Would this kind of project fit there?
Yes. So the baseline proposal I asked students the summary I gave them for students was, if you instrument with coverage Boto while running S3 tests, what part of Boto's S3 APIs are we not yet touching? And if we then focus on the ones that are implemented in RGW, we know where there's no test coverage. And the initial submissions on this look promising, with some caveats that Boto builds most of its stuff dynamically from the JSON. So there's some magic involved in that.
Right.
The parts where that doesn't necessarily wind up being covered, and I still believe there's probably future room, are things where Boto doesn't cover parts of the S3 spec. For example, variants that you could put into the cause XML and then run the requests that should return various parts of cause headers or static sites behavior on the static sites configuration aren't well covered in Boto. Boto lets you set the XML payload, but there's not really meaningful ways of pulling it back. Browser post uploads have the same problem. Boto just doesn't do them. It'll happily generate the signed URL pieces that you need, but you can't actually operate them with Boto. You need other coverage for that. Like I've mentioned browser post specifically because there was a previous bug there where certain policies set in browser post didn't work. So like we're going to need something bigger than Boto, or where that should fit in, if S3 tests is even the right place for it.
Interesting. So that that sounds like it'll be a great help just understanding what isn't covered already by the S3 tests.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind is that at least in the field we've seen certain kind of scenarios exposed when there are a combination of RGW operations going on, like resharding and listing, things like that. So are there existing tests in tautology that already exercise those kind of scenarios?
Not around reshard, no. We have sparse testing of reshard commands themselves, but not while a workload is running. Though dynamic reshard is running in the background during our existing testing.
That's a kind of a combined operation that this randomized testing can help bind. Like when you're talking about backend operations in terms of resharding or GC or dedup, having the kind of state space walked so while those things are happening can turn up all kinds of issues that you wouldn't otherwise see. Especially not if you've got a statically defined set of tests that you're always running the same kind of way.
So where can I find the Rados tests that do this? Do I have a better idea of how it works?
I think they're in that source test OSD directory under Rados model.h.
Got it, thanks.
Sure.
Any other thoughts here or new agenda items before we call it?
I have one last question. We got feedback that customers are interested in this multi-site sync policy, and I was wondering is this info, at least the info, can be retrieved via the admin ops API also?
Sorry, what was the question?
About the multi-site sync policy. If we want to know what is more or less the status or the configured, can be retrieved via the admin ops API?
Like you can get. I'm trying to think if you get the register to admin metadata get bucket or bucket instance info for the bucket, if you see that information, you might be, but if not, then no. So
it should be in the metadata of the bucket.
The bucket instance metadata, but it's there, but it might be that it's like encoded. So either you see it or not. I think you see it. But if not, then need to go through the Redis get to admin commands. In order to modify it, you probably do need to go through the admin.
Okay.
Now bucket policy stuff also appears on the zone, or the zone group actually. So like you can configure stuff per zone group, like global configuration, and then you can configure stuff per bucket. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think I'll close with a plug for the weekly RGW and refactoring meeting. Happens every Wednesday, where we have kind of higher level design discussions about the work that we're doing. You can find that on the community calendar. That's all I have, though. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
You all.